It's a people, it's a community, it's a life, it's a heart, it's a spirit.
Parents of gay children say, I want my son, my gay son, to have the same opportunity to come to me and say, hey, Dad, I'm getting married, as my non-gay son or my non-gay daughter.
The heck would you want a picture of a tattoo of $1,000 on your penis, Christ?
You might just need to satisfy yourself sexually alone at that point.
Do I regret it? Not one bit. Did I think that I would actually take it to the next step and do it again?
And what goes into their life, how they handle it. There are 12 houses, and each one of those houses has a particular function.
Look into yourself, think about it, and just be whoever it is that speaks to you.
Hello and welcome to Talking About. My name is Jon Griffith. I am your co-host along with...
And I'm JC Alvarez, and we're very happy to welcome as our guest today, Dr. Frank Spinelli.
Hey guys, thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming by and for writing this amazing book.
Thank you.
Yeah, The Advocate Guide to Gay Men's Health and Wellness.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, yes, yes, but such a great read.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Frank? It's like, maybe this is like the first introduction to our viewers.
Well, I'm a native New Yorker. I was born in Staten Island. I did a lot of my training in Manhattan itself. Initially, ironically, I started out as a surgeon. I did that for about 2 years, and then that was about the same time I actually came out as a gay man. So it was a big turning point for me. And then I went into internal medicine. I thought that was a better fit. And if you could imagine, at the time, it's about, oh my God, it's about 14 years ago.
Don't date yourself.
I dated myself in the book, so it's over. So you could imagine that we've already hit the peak of the AIDS epidemic. So I remember distinctly when I first started in the ICU that very first day, there were still many men on ventilators suffering from HIV and the effects of opportunistic infections. And it was one of those watershed moments where you realize this is what I want to do. And I then pursued a career in, not gay health, but I wanted to do HIV, and that's when I went into practice. And I found that I wasn't prepared to deal with gay men. I mean, you could deal with, because a lot of men, a lot of friends asked me, why do we need a gay men's health book? We have men's health books. We're all made about the same way. What's the difference? And the difference is that the way we live, and that's what I really wanted to focus on. And so I started writing in magazines and nationally, and basically compiling information concerning gay men, what they were coming in, what they were asking me, and what I was looking up, and then saying, I think I have enough information to put a handbook together. And it wasn't so much reinventing the wheel. There's been books before it, but I wanted something that was very comprehensive, accessible, but yet, light, that you could read it and not think, oh, this, I just want to wrap myself in cellophane and hide.
Yeah, and the book does handle a lot of serious topics with a light touch, which is why I found it to be such a page turner. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks for saying that. I mean, that's one of the things you want to accomplish. And as a doctor, you tend to talk like doctors speak, and that could be very boring, and you always find yourself trying to clarify that.
Right.
And not dumb it down, but trying to make it basic. And my parents are from Italy, so I grew up speaking in a way that they could understand when I was explaining things to them. So I hope that that came across in the book,
absolutely,
actually.
yeah.
So I thought, what better way of doing it would maybe to just wrap it around my life story and sort of how I came into being a gay doctor and how I treat gay patients, and then also the stories that happen, because you could write a story about just being a Chelsea doctor.
Well, it's funny because when I was, I remember when I was looking for a doctor, my mother actually suggested to me that I find a gay male doctor, and instinctively I was just like, what does she mean by that? It's like, Mom, what are you talking about? And but she made a very significant point. She's like, well, you're a gay man, and it only makes sense to me that you have a physician that knows exactly what you do and the aspects of your lifestyle. How important do you think it is that relation between doctor and patient?
Well, initially I probably thought like you did. I probably would have thought, I want a good doctor. I don't want to just go to somebody because they're Italian or because they're gay. But it is important to have that kind of dialogue between a doctor that's already available, that he understands you, he already understands your life. And of course, initially I said, well, you should go to a gay doctor if you're gay. And then I got in a lot of trouble because I know a lot of great, gay-friendly doctors that aren't gay who who are very good, who are very open and honest. But I do make that point to patients and friends that are looking for doctors. I'd say, you know, you should try to find yourself a really good gay doctor, because you'll just be more apt to telling him things you might not want to talk about with a heterosexual man.
Well, because do you have to be like that? You know, I guess you do. I mean, I don't really think about it, but I guess you have to tell your doctor as much about what you do in your lifestyle as possible.
You know what really opened my eyes? Must have been about the 3rd year I was in practice. I think of myself as a very openly gay man. I don't hang a rainbow flag, but I just think it's there, you know. And a patient came in, and I went through the questionnaire, and one of them was, you know, are you sexually active? Yes. Do you have sex with men, women, or both? I learned not to accuse people of anything.
Sure.
He was like, well, that's none of your business. So I was like, okay, so we let that go. And then I remember when he came for the second follow-up visit, he was very upset with me. He says, I don't think you have that right to ask me about sex. And I said, well, I do have the right to ask you. You have the right not to answer. But that idea that he was closeted in a gay practice really shook me. Like, even towards each other, we have this barrier that we keep from each other because there's so much internalized homophobia. One of the most important things I thought about when I first came out was, I thought once I came out, it was going to be like gay solidarity. It was going to be like, hey guys, we're all in it together, aren't we? And it's not. It's almost like high school all over again. There were these cliques, and who went to the gym, and who was pretty, and I think even when we grow older, gay men still have those barriers of resistance towards each other. I'm not sure if I can trust you. So that translates directly with your doctor. So I learned from some of the best gay doctors. They're my medical mentors, and I named one of them, which is Larry Higgins, who taught me everything about how to talk to people and not say, are you gay? Because immediately that finger comes up and you think,
oh, sure.
Don't
accuse me of that.
So it's almost having, instead of the finger, it's almost the open the arms and say, this is the way we are here. I want you to feel free and comfortable to go about it as long as it takes for you to come to the realization of what you want to tell me. And one of the best things that ever came out of this book for me, and the experience of coming here and talking to people, is men who've come out because of it and said, you know, finally I thought I had to come out, and I was 40 or I was 50, and I thought I want to start living my life. And that's an inspiration for me to just want to continue doing this.
Well, it certainly makes it easier to explain to your doctor if they know that you're gay, and if they're gay, it's kind of like how you're feeling about something, like, you know, I don't know what that is down there, but, you know.
Well, yeah, it opens the door for a lot of things. I'm amazed how, you know, I'm a doctor, so I always tell lawyers I know nothing about law. Teach me everything. You know, there's certain things you know and you don't know. And when patients come in and said, oh, well, I got gonorrhea, but I didn't really do anything, and it's like, well, you did something. And then you talk about it, and, you know, it is a serious illness, and we don't want to make light of it, but it's almost, it can be humorous to hear how people interpret information and how they can get diseases, and that's why I wrote the book, to say, look, this is the facts, this is what you should know. I mean, when we make a little bit of side jokes like saying Dr. Frank sex tips and stuff like that, but it's
which I bolded.
Yes,
they were good. I just, you know.
But you know, you think it's so obvious we all should know that, but we don't, because we don't talk about it and we don't hear about it. You know, this is probably one of the best years. 2000 and beyond have been the best years for gay people, because we see such positive role models in the media. When I was growing up, and I remember that Al Pacino movie Cruising came out, how horrifying was that for me? And then I remember I watched the Gay Pride Parade, and somebody was walking a man on a leash, and my mother watched it, and I thought, that's what she thinks gay people are. But now, part of this book and the touring has really been to reevaluate how we want to project an image. You know, men and lesbians are getting married now. They're having families. So promote that image. Promote happy awareness. Couples that are together, my best friend Eric and Scott are together like 14 years. These are the things we should promote. And these are the things I wanted to focus on in the book, as a way of saying, you know, we do think that we're just like everybody else, and we exist and we cohabitate, but we do have to take ownership of the fact that we are gay. We shouldn't hide it. One of the great things about being one of the tricky things about being gay is that I said in the book, unlike any other minority, when you get picked on at school for being African American or whatever, you go home and you have your parents to identify with. When you're gay, you don't have that. So
well, some people do.
Well, some people do now, which is great. But when I was 10, I didn't. And so you grow up in this closeted existence, and the closet really is pervasive, and it goes on well beyond you know,
Sure,
adulthood. And so then how do you come out of the closet, reconcile with this new identity you have, and then bring it forth into your world? I mean, I didn't say this before, but I had a ex-girlfriend who really just reconnected with me, and the fact that I had to say, oh, well, I'm gay now, and then she was like, oh, that's so cool, and now we're friends, but in this other way. And I think that's what's so interesting. So not to be cautionary, but just to say to gay men, still retain that gayness about yourself. That's still who we are as men and who we are as people. It's like, I don't know if you want to put your race first or your gayhood first, but it's got to be one of those things that you keep in the top three.
Well, the book promotes all the aspects of what I think are really great components to your health and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Because, I mean, you discuss things like diet, you discuss things like, you know, but you're also very frank about not only things that are good for you, but things that, you know, are very realistic in the gay culture, like circuit parties and just like that whole environment.
Things you don't know anything about as well, I didn't know anything about it when I was growing up as a teen. I moved into New York, and the first thing somebody wants to do is they want to take me to a bar or a club, and I went, wow, what's this? And to understand the circuit party phenomena, and that you could travel for an event, and that there are probably events almost every weekend, and they go on for a long period of time, and for some of the participants, it involves a tremendous amount of drugs, and the effects drugs have had on the community.
Right, the long-term effects.
Smoking rates are higher among gay men, alcohol rates, depression, teen suicide among gay men is higher, and drugs, and the use not only of recreational drugs, but anabolic steroids and body dysmorphism and how we see ourselves in the mirror. You know, doing the research, anorexia and bulimia are higher in gay men as opposed to heterosexual men. So once again, the book wasn't directed at gay men as men's health. It was the health issues that affect gay men.
Yeah, right, because there are things that still surprise me. I mean, I was at a hotel a few months ago, and it was a community hotel, and somebody was kind of walking around. There were a couple of clubs within the complex. Are you friends with Tina? Are you friends with Tina? Are you friends with Tina? It's like, go away.
Yeah,
but that's the reality.
I was part of a panel at GMHC here in New York talking about crystal meth and still trying to reach men who do meth. And one of the interesting things that I learned from that, because it was a very heated, very controversial night, was that what are the stigma behind crystal meth? We think of drug addiction as people that are in the corner and they're all wrecked, they have no money. And
we sometimes say it's even genetic.
Certainly it is, but we forget about those who are I call them, they're functional addicts. They use drugs maybe once or twice a day on a regular basis, but still go to work. There was a great book called Overcoming Crystal Meth by a friend of mine, Dr. Steve Lee. He called it one thing the morning eye opener, where men would do a bump in the morning and then go to work. And then over the long term, how this affects the way you think. I mean, the paranoia, the almost schizophrenic-like paranoia about your day-to-day interactions. And when you're in it, you don't really see what's happening to you until you have no more money, or you're in the hospital, or you've jumped off a building. And that's what I think we've missed in the gay community, is redirecting that, and how do we get these guys to talk about their problems. And one of the issues with that crystal meth night was they tried to advertise it by showing this sexy guy, and that sexy guy could be a trigger for somebody to want to use meth. So there's a lot we don't know about this disease and how it affects men, but it's something we keep in the closet almost, because we don't really want to talk about it, because it's another one of those bad gay secrets. We don't want to deal with the drugs, because we don't want everybody to think we're this, drug crazed and disco ball, and we got our shirts off, and
well, I mean, it's every part of the spectrum, but you have to see the whole spectrum, and people just see what they want to see sometimes, and that's
tough. My feeling is that it's like HIV. I initially wrote the book because I felt that everything that we talked about that was gay health was HIV. They had become synonymous. And I thought, well, there's so much more to it. And when we were discussing it with the publisher, Allison Books, they said, should we include HIV? And I said, absolutely, but we we can't really focus on it because HIV is its own book in itself.
Well, and it's changed so much.
But
in the
it's
last
something
25
that you
years.
have to say that affects gay men, and we as a community need to take care of that, just as we need to take care of crystal meth and other drug problems that happen, or other medical, problems that happen in our community. We have to take care of ourselves, and that means take care of you and me and our friends.
Well, it's just amazing that we have so much information about the effects of crystal meth, long-term and short-term, and what any kind of drug can do to your body, and certainly how it's going to affect your health. But for anyone out there who thinks that this is just part of their lifestyle and it's just normal, what are some of the long-term debilitating effects of being a crystal meth addict?
Well, I think before I get to that, before you think of, whenever someone looks at themselves and says, I don't have a problem, when I ask patients, do you do drugs, do you use recreational drugs, how much do you use, how much alcohol do you use, you really have to ask yourself, how much do I use, but also, how does it affect my life? Have I had to miss work because of this? Have I missed opportunities or been late or shrugged things because I was too busy doing drugs?
Right.
Or I chose to do drugs instead of something else that was more important? And then when you really think in those terms, you see how much the drug has made a choice for you as opposed to you, and how out of control you are, and how you've relinquished your control to the drug. One of the most interesting things is that we think of alcohol dependency as someone that needs to get drunk every night. But if you're getting inebriated every weekend, you could be classified as an alcohol dependent. It's just the degree of how much you use and how it interferes with your daily living.
I have a lot of friends who are in recovery, and while some of them lost everything, some of them say, I never got to the point where I lost anything, but I never gained anything.
Exactly, and then also how it isolates you.
Depression, anxiety,
of course, all that depression, anxiety, but also how the drug becomes almost something you don't want to share with others because you're embarrassed, so you do it at home, you do it at home alone, you refrain from keeping social contacts with your friends and your family, you're lying. It just becomes this cycle of abuse, and it's very hard. I've seen it firsthand with friends and close friends, where you couldn't get them out of it, and realistically, I know we say it over and over again, but you really can't help someone. They have to want to help themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
And one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is just shut myself off from that person and say, you need to move on, and I can't enable you. I can't do this for you because all I'm doing is allowing you to do drugs or alcohol and giving you an excuse to do it. And that's one of the hardest things you can do. You can always just lead a horse to water. I mean, I've gone to meetings with friends, and I've tried to get them to go to meetings, but you have to want to do it yourself. So in the book, so much, I just try to outline basics about it. There are other great books, especially Dr. Steve Lee's, who really outlines how it affects it. Long-term effects, we do know it involves dopamine. If you think about another disease state that involves dopamine, it's Parkinson's disease and those resting tremors. And incidentally, I love documentaries, and I had been doing, for the Crystal Meth Night, they called it Meth in Movies. And I was trying to look at movies that had something to do with crystal meth. And I found an interesting documentary that showed Adolf Hitler. Crystal meth was developed during that war, probably to help the kamikazes fly those long distances, but also they gave it to the troops so that they could stay awake. And the end of Hitler's life, he wasn't allowed to be filmed anymore. He didn't want to be filmed because he had like this pill rolling, which they thought was Parkinson's. But I, like a lot of other people, think he was a crystal meth.
Wow, that's a
find
frightening thought. Yeah.
Well, you should think about it. Puts it in a different respect. But yeah, it does have those long-term effects like Parkinson's disease, and it definitely, we've seen CAT scans of what meth brains look like after long-term, and it does eat away, and it does cause all these cognitive defects.
Now, we certainly want to bring, you brought up the point earlier about HIV in the gay community, and how we really have to focus on HIV practice and how that's changed, because now the virus is, we approach it very differently than we did before.
Yeah, I mean, we can actually say the word treatable, chronic disease. Those are the words we use now instead of deadly and incurable. Certainly when I first started practicing, it was a horrifying prospect to think I was going to have to tell somebody they were HIV positive. The emotionality of it, crying, thinking, okay, and I'm just going to give somebody this death sentence. And just recently, I've turned that corner where I can look at somebody and say, if this was 5 years ago, I'd probably be very, very upset for you right now. but I think there's a lot we can offer you. And I feel really strongly that there are two audiences you talk to when you speak to gay men. Those that are HIV positive and those that are not. And it's very hard to confuse the two together because your message has to be very strict. For those who are HIV negative, you want to say, you don't want this. You want to prevent it, you want to use condoms, and you want to be as far away from this as possible. And then you want to redirect and say, and then for those of you who are positive, there's a lot we can offer. There's some great treatments. You can live a longer life than we ever predicted 25 years ago. But it's very tricky.
On one hand, you have to instill some fear, and on the other hand, you have to ease the mind.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways, after the 80s, we were so scared, we were so cautionary, everybody was petrified of becoming HIV positive that the pendulum swung all the way to the other way. And, and we started having all these ads for HIV drugs, like, hey, it's not so bad. Hey, one pill once a day. And
hey, I can climb a mountain.
Which is great, because we wanted to send a positive message to those who had HIV, but it almost put those who were negative into this frame of saying, well, if it's not so bad, then when I get it, I don't have to worry about it.
Exactly, because I mean, it's like myself, I come from a generation that we were taught to fear HIV and taught to fear AIDS, and it's kind of like been a part of our life. But there's an entire new generation that just thinks, I'll just take a pill.
And I'm very interested because when I was interviewing patients talking about this, I had my youngest patient ever that seroconverted. He was 23, and very upsetting story. And he's very grounded. He understands the disease state, and it wasn't a complacency issue. It wasn't one of those things where he was just stupid and didn't care and was careless. It was an accident. But he never felt like, oh, I didn't know the 80s and I didn't know how deadly it was and I didn't think it was that bad. He knew how bad it was. There are people who feel like the younger age group, maybe there is a complacency. They didn't live through the 80s. They don't remember all those great movies like Longtime Companion, where you cry your eyes out when you see people wasting away and dying from wasting. That's a horrible thing to see. And a lot of the doctors I talked to and I mentored with said they were going to funerals like every week. I mean, their patients were just dropping like flies, and that had to feel like being in a war.
Yeah.
And the aftermath of this war now on HIV is just dealing with it as a chronic disease. I rarely admit patients to the hospital now for an AIDS-related complication, but still the message has to be prevention.
Right.
And I hate saying if it's like diabetes, but I don't think I would want any disease. That's
Absolutely,
the way I think of it.
Yeah.
But
it's nice to know that something like HIV is controllable, and people can live healthy lifestyles, and that it's because I mean I think with most people what closes them off is intimacy changes. I mean, it's like one of the things you discuss in your book is like safe sex practices, and sometimes someone who's HIV, they think they can't do anything sexually.
That brings up so many points. One of the things I hear a lot from HIV-positive patients who are out of relationship is, or they're single, is who's going to love me now? Or how do I have the conversation with somebody I just start dating? And that still breaks my heart because it's always there. Even though you might forget your day-to-day, it is something you need to address. And there are many, what we call discordant couples, where one is positive and one is negative, who never transmit the virus to the other because they know the facts. They know we have to play safe, we're together, and they just accept it readily. But for those people who think that HIV is just in the back of their minds and they can forget about it, that's absolutely wrong. I hear it in the voices of my patients where they say, I sometimes forget, but when I have to start dating or when I'm in bed with somebody or if there's an accident, I think, oh my God, please, I hope I didn't give it to somebody. So it's always there. You can't really diminish that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in the book, you raise a couple of really good points, not only along with those safe sex practices, which, I mean, there were things in there that I didn't even know were safe sex. I thought that they were risky. And I was just like, oh, wow, that's great. That's, that's not so bad. I can still do that.
You can kiss. You're not going to
it's like, oh, okay, I can do that. All right, cool. But clinically, you discuss PrEP and PEP, which a lot of people really don't know a lot about. Could you talk about that?
It's funny. I had written so many articles on post-exposure prophylaxis, which what does PEP stand for? PEP initially came out for occupational exposures in the hospital, needle sticks or whatever kind of contamination with blood byproducts to prevent hepatitis B. Then they developed one for HIV. And the protocol is simply, if you come into exposure with an HIV blood from a cut or a scrape or something where you've really been contaminated, the idea is to get tested for HIV right away. If you're negative, then you started on antiretroviral medication for 28 days, and then if you show any signs or symptoms of HIV seroconversion, you get tested again, but after the 28 days, you get tested in a month, 3 months, and 6 months as follows. And the idea is that when you're exposed to the virus, you don't necessarily contract it that day. It takes time for it to enter the blood and the lymph nodes and then for you to get it. So we were trying to get it in that very narrow window of opportunity, which is less than 36 hours. And the studies show that you want to do that as quick as possible, less than 4 hours in the San Francisco study. So as soon as possible, no more than that, because then you're at risk for seroconversion, and it's a very complicated issue. So when they then started saying we should then implement this for the community when there's a sexual problem, whether you've been contracted, then we should do that as well. And a lot of gay doctors know about this, and they, you know, when patients called them on a Saturday night and they said, look, the condom break, you said, get to an emergency room right away. We know now that. But I don't think you see a lot of that in the media, and I think that's because we just don't talk about gay issues as much. So I wrote a lot about PEP. One of the worst things I heard was someone calling it the morning after pill. It's not a morning after pill, and I hate that reference.
Because you're not offering a solution here. It's not.
Well, we don't want to use this as a way of promoting unsafe sexual practices. You know, we don't want this to be your sort of gay birth control. You know, this is for accidents. This is for contamination. This
actual
is
emergencies.
Yeah, I mean, we don't. And the good news is that the 2 Brazilian studies that they did that showed that would men that knew about PEP then go on and have unsafe sex later on, and it showed that they actually wouldn't, because I actually, in the book, I gave a story where I was stuck by a needle from somebody who had hepatitis C and HIV, and he was dying, and I went into shock, and I had a very smart resident who dragged me right to the emergency room, and I was started on PEP, and luckily, I was very lucky I didn't contract it. But you have to know that, you know, you do not want to be on this medicine if you didn't have to, especially then when it was the older medications and they were really harsh on your system. So it's almost like a wake-up call to say, we better get some really good condoms because I never want this to happen to me again.
Well, because HIV medications are extremely toxic.
Well, I would say the older ones were very, especially a lot of the protease inhibitors. You had to take them multiple pills, multiple times a day. And, you know, if you're working and going about your business on a daily basis, it could be very hard on your system. A lot of the newer drugs have better, side effect profiles, but it's still not to say that you don't undergo some sort of side effects in the beginning, at least initially. And that can be tough on some people, as opposed to some others. Some don't have any side effects at all. But PEP is there as a safety net in case something goes wrong. That's why we publicize it. That's why we talk about it in the book. PrEP, if you add a little R, is pre-exposure. And I told a story in the book how I had 2 patients. One was HIV positive, one was negative. And the one that was negative liked to go to sex parties. And I used to just listen to him, and I said, you know, you careful when you go to these sex parties? He goes, yeah, I'm careful, but what I do is I steal my boyfriend's HIV drugs that night, and I take it before I go. And I thought, wow, how bizarre. But this is what PrEP really was. This guy just thought of it before everybody started instituting it. So I thought,
it's almost frightening.
It is frightening, but in some crazy way, it's interesting that he even came up with
leave it
this
to the
idea.
gays.
Yeah.
Very crafty gays.
Yeah, and just people can find more information on our website, www.talkingabout.info, and there's a link to your website there as well.
Or you can go to AllisonBooks.com.
AllisonBooks.com.